Thank you for listening to Mormon Sex Info. This episode is an archived episode and is only now becoming publicly available. Mormon Sex Info relies on contributions. To contribute, please visit mormonsex.info. And now, please enjoy this episode.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Mormon Sex Info. This is Natasha Helfer Parker, and today I have with me Alisha Worthington. She is a sexual educator, a graduate of BYU in social work, and has co-authored the book called Real Intimacy, A Couple's Guide to Healthy, Genuine Sexuality. She's appeared on X96's radio show in Utah, taking live calls. She's a regular contributor to FamilyShare.com, and has had articles published in the Deseret News and other major news publications. Has also appeared monthly on KUTV News discussing relationship and intimacy issues, and I'm super happy to have her with me here today to talk specifically about the issue of lubrication. So this is Lube 101. So welcome, yes. Alisha, to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited to talk about this topic because it's more important than I think people realize. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, I think this is a great topic and very applicable to really, I think, most people who are having some type of sexual relationship.
Absolutely. And, but I'm just really passionate about sex and sex education, which is why I do what I do. And I am active in the LDS church and feel like there's just a lot of conversation that we need to have around these topics. So it's a good mix.
With kind of a basic understanding of what the natural process of lubrication is. So how are our bodies engineered, and what role does lubrication play in our sexuality?
Okay. So think of lubrication. Well, obviously lubrication allows things to move more smoothly. You can think of a car engine, and we use oil to allow the car engine to move smoothly. So in our bodies, lubrication, we have lubrication in our mouths through saliva. We have lubrication in various areas. So when a woman's going to have sex, her body generally, now I use the word generally because there are exceptions, her body generally will start to self-lubricate, and it's not necessarily because she is turned on, which is a myth in our culture that we can talk about later. It has to do more with her body's defenses. Her body knows that something is about to enter, and the lining of the vagina is, that skin is sensitive, it's viscous, and so the body wants to do what it can to protect the lining of the vagina, as well as lubrication helps semen travel up through the vagina quicker and without the female body trying to kill it. So it kind of serves two purposes.
Right, because the vaginal cavity is quite acidic, right? And actually not very sperm friendly.
No, it's not. And so the lubrication kind of serves two purposes. And so that's the basic biological reason that lubrication happens.
There's secretions that happen with the penis as well, correct?
Yes, there are secretions, and it's important to remember that there can be semen in those secretions. And so if you are using a condom, or if you're thinking, oh, okay, we can wait and actually put on a condom when we're actually having more intense sex and we won't get pregnant, that is a misnomer. That condom has got to go on beforehand because there is semen in that also in the male lubrication. Or there can be.
Okay, so when this goes well, both the male lubrication and the female lubrication serve, I think, the higher purpose, I guess, of, like you said, not only protecting the vaginal walls and cavities, but also this idea of it being a pleasurable, non-painful experience.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Okay.
Because, again, this is what I have a lot of my clients do. I will have them take their tongues, which your listeners can do. Take your tongues and feel the inside of your cheek. that is about what the inside of the vagina feels like. It's warm, it's moist, it's wet, but that skin is also very, very sensitive. And if you can imagine rubbing something along your cheek, just back and forth after time, if that cheek gets dry, it's going to maybe make some little cuts, or it's not going to feel good. It's going to kind of feel raw, and that doesn't end up feeling great. So that's a really easy way to kind of understand, I think, help people understand how lubrication is working in the vagina, is to kind of relate it to the inside of your cheek.
Okay, great. That's a great example. So let's go back then to the interplay of desire, because I think that for, again, if we talk about the typical experiences or stereotypical experience, we would say that as one becomes aroused, as one gets prepared for sexual intercourse that one is excited about and looking forward to, there's a lot of things that happen in the brain that start this process of the arousal mechanism, which includes lubrication. Mm-hmm. And so many people would find that as their arousal increases, they find themselves lubricated or wet, as many people call it, or whatever. So there's obviously exceptions to that, but can we talk about body when things are going as we would expect them to go?
Yeah. And so you just may notice, for women, you may notice just a lot more moisture, just a feeling of wetness as your body starts to self-lubricate. Your partner can help this as far as through stimulation, and some good foreplay helps this to kind of get your body in tune with what's happening and things like that. Now, there is kind of that myth out there of a woman will say, or actually this is from 50 Shades of Grey, when he's doing something to her and she says, this isn't doing it for me. And he goes, well, your body says otherwise. And so that misnomer out there, that myth, is confusing for men and for women, because just because a woman's body does what it's biologically designed to do doesn't mean that her brain and heart are into what is happening. And so it's important for men and women to remember that, so that it's not confusing, so that even if her body is lubricating, it's still important to check in and make sure what is happening is what she wants to be happening, and vice versa.
Yeah, so the importance of communication, the importance of consent.
That lubrication is not an indication of desire. It could be an indication of my body is becoming aroused in some way, and it's responding to this sort of touch and circumstances, but I'm still not into this.
Which, I mean, this podcast is not about this, but this has a lot of implications for sexual trauma victims, right? Who are very confused as to why their bodies, in essence, betrayed them, in a time of traumatic experience, became lubricated, or even had some type of orgasmic response to something that was actually very scary or unwanted.
Totally. Yep. Yeah. So this could be a podcast for another time.
Yes. And I think it's the reverse as well, where you might very much have desire to have sex, feel aroused, and then you're not becoming naturally lubricated, which is, I think, a big part of what we'll be talking about today.
Yes, and that is where actual commercial or some other type of lubrication will come in, because that happens frequently, that your heart is into it, your brain is into it, you're getting into it, you're feeling good, and nothing's happening in your vagina. And so again, some people can think, oh, well, I guess I'm not turned on, or something's wrong with me. Or your partner may think, oh, you're not turned on, what's happening? Because it can be, women have a little bit easier time sometimes knowing when their male partners are turned on, because we have this erect penis to look at. But sometimes men have used whether or not a woman is lubricated to indicate if she is actually enjoying what's happening. So again, she may be really into it, nothing's lubricating, and that can be a confusing message. And it doesn't have to be. That's again a check-in to say, okay, I'm into this and I really want to do this with you. So let's just pull out our handy tube of lubrication that happens to be sitting in our drawer next to the bed. So, because it doesn't mean needing to use lubrication does not mean you're broken. It doesn't mean you're not into it. It doesn't mean any of those things. It doesn't mean that you are. I think some people feel like if they're using any sort of assistance, there's kind of a taboo, especially in our LDS culture, around using any sort of outside assistance, that it should just be working because God designed us this way and there shouldn't be any problems or something's not right. And I guess I would say, have any of you ever bought over-the-counter medication for a headache or for a cold? That's outside stuff that you're using to help your body along. Or do you go to the gym and use the weights? That's outside stuff that you're using to help your body along. I would put lubrication or other tools or toys in the same exact category. You're just using something to help your body along. And so that said, lubrication can totally help increase your pleasure. Think about if you went and got a massage. Would you rather have a massage with massage oil or just their hands? It's going to feel good, but it's going to feel a lot better actually using massage oil and allow those hands to slide over your body. That's what lubrication can do. If you are going to use any sort of sex toy, it can help that be a lot more comfortable. And if you are in a situation where you're having some sort of health issue, you've just had a baby, you're taking some sort of medication, there are a lot of medicines out there that will dry up your body, that will especially dry up a woman's body. Any sort of medications like that, then that just increases the person's desire or feeling like they have to perform. And using lubrication can help take the pressure off. Like, oh, this is one less thing I have to worry about. I'm really into this, and I can use this to at least not put pressure on myself to have to self-lubricate. And it just makes sexual activities possible for a lot of different folks. It just helps.
Yeah, no, that's a great overview, and I really appreciate the discussions, around kind of myths and I guess ideas that we've identified with, such as, successful sex means I will lubricate naturally, right? Or successful sex means as soon as I'm aroused, I will have, natural lubrication happening. And when those things don't happen, how easy it is to blame ourselves, right? Or to find fault with ourselves or with our partner, instead of understanding kind of the biological mechanisms behind it, or that these are, our bodies oftentimes don't follow through in ways we'd like them to do. And even some of the Mormon messaging around, what it means to be a successful woman or man or couple or sexual partner. And I think there's a lot of importance in being a loving partner, in Mormonism, which is really wonderful. But then if you feel like you're somehow sexually broken, then that can really play quite a big role in you feeling bad about yourself, like you're somehow letting down your partner or yourself or your marriage.
Absolutely. And again, we sometimes blame ourselves, I think, when something is not going right on a biological level, that somehow either we've done something wrong or we didn't pray hard enough, or, it's some sort of punishment for something that maybe we did as teenagers. Oh, well, now this is my consequence. And I don't think that at all. We have bodies that are designed to live on this earth, that the earth isn't perfect, our bodies aren't perfect, and every day you can look around, there are plenty of instances of people's bodies, like you said, not doing what they want them to do, or what would be the ideal version. We are not the ideal versions of our bodies yet, so it's okay to help them along.
Yeah, and the only thing that I would couch from what you said, as far as I think you would agree with me, is that like male erection is similar to female arousal, and
Okay,
that it may not.
just to add to that, because I think that's really an important point that you bring up is because I had mentioned about how an erect penis kind of gives women an idea that men are turned on, and I think that's really important just to add that men can have the same type of experience where their body is responding and they are not turned on. I worked with a man who unfortunately witnessed kind of some sexual violence and was absolutely mortified that his body responded and he thought something was wrong with him. And basically it was because he was not turned on, he was not anything, and he went to the aid of this female, but he really thought that maybe he was just a really horrible person. And just reminding him, your body just responded in a biological process. It had nothing to do with your brain or your heart. It was just biology. And so that can, and on the converse, many men can experience being quite turned on and are not erect. So that's also a very normal process.
Yeah, which that will be another podcast, is erectile
Yeah.
issues for sure.
Yes.
Okay, so what would you say are some of the common issues as to why women in particular have recognizing that they have some issues with natural lubrication?
Okay, so a really obvious one would be any sort of health issues, but a main one is pregnancy. Pregnancy completely changes your hormones, everything having to do with your genitals, and so pregnancy can either enhance it or it can dry you right up. And after you've had the baby, especially if a woman happens to be breastfeeding, the extra progesterone in your body makes it very difficult to self-lubricate. And so that's a common thing. As I mentioned before, many types of medications, many allergy medicines, any sort of over-the-counter cold medicines that are going to help. Anything that's going to dry out your mucous membrane is going to dry out your vagina, because your vagina is also a mucous membrane. So anything that you're taking that causes that is going to cause dryness in the vaginal area too. Menopause for women, different cancer treatments. There's just a variety. And then also, not only just biological processes, but any sort of context in which a woman feels she is unsafe or is just not into it, or it's not the time, or she's highly stressed. Those are all times that the body just may not respond in the way that she's thinking it should.
Yeah, so even normal amounts of stress in your day-to-day life that you may not consider, you may not attribute, right, to sexual functioning, but you've had a bad day at work, or you're stressed out with your kids, or obviously mental health issues, right, like depression, anxiety disorders. I've heard oral contraceptions can also play a role in this, which you're trying to take oral contraceptions to have sex, and then there's issues with that. And also I think just frequent sexual intercourse, and this sometimes I notice is an issue for newlyweds who are very excited to be quite sexual, those first few weeks that they're married, and but often usually at a time when they're not highly sexually educated as far as what might be helpful, and so all of a sudden sexuality or sex can become painful at a time when you're really wanting to be more sexual, and that can feel like a betrayal of your body.
Absolutely. And that's where, I don't know if you want to get into this yet, but this is where we can talk about specifics of lube and types of lube and the importance of choosing a good one. Do you want to go that direction now?
Yeah, let's go there in just a minute. One other thing I wanted to just touch base on was this sense of like not unsafety, but like I'm not necessarily aroused, but my spouse is, and therefore I want to offer a quickie, or I want to, have some type of sexual intercourse with him because I I feel that either pressure or desire to give of myself in that way, which we can talk a little bit about the issues with that. But that oftentimes will not be a time when you're naturally lubricated. And therefore, I think a lot of women put up with or expect sex to be painful. And therefore, they think that that's actually a normal thing versus really understanding that as a cue to stop, to, oh, it hurts, I should stop what I'm doing and do something different.
Yes.
Because I was talking about the importance of vaginal memory, and if your vagina, is expecting sex to hurt, then it's going to be that much more likely that your vagina is going to not want to necessarily look forward to the next time around either. And so you can start kind of some really recurring or cyclical patterns with genital pain that can be very unfortunate.
Totally. I don't know about you, but every time I go to the dentist, I sit in that chair and my hands are just clenching the arms. And I have a great dentist, and he's very kind and gentle, but it's just, I can't get over sometimes the memory of some of the experiences I have had. And I'll notice that I'm clenched. And when I notice that, I'll breathe and relax. But anytime there's a memory of pain, your body remembers and it anticipates. And especially vaginal pain, here you're about to have something enter a pretty sensitive part of your body. And all your brain can signal is, pain's coming, maybe pain is coming. And that is not going to allow your body to relax. That is going to cause all those muscles to tense up, which even if you are thinking, well, I'm not tense, those little muscles remember, and they'll tense up in anticipation because they're trying to protect you. They're just doing their job. And then tense, tight muscles is not going to make for less pain upon entry. It's going to make for more pain. And then your body, like you said, it enters into this cyclical pattern of, oh, now we just anticipate pain. And then unfortunately, because sex is not really talked about and because sex education is kind of taboo, then you have a lot of young Mormon women, I think, walking around thinking that pain is a normal part of sex. And you have had maybe their older sisters or a well-meaning friend just say, oh yeah, get ready, it's going to be painful, because those are all the experiences they've had, instead of going, is this really normal? Is this something that I actually need to experience? We just kind of take it on face value, like this is everybody's experience. Instead of being able to feel like we can branch out and ask questions. Let me just put in a plug as a sexual educator. There is nothing wrong with asking any question you want about your body, how it functions, what it does, about your partner's body. This body is your gift from God, and you have a right to know about it. So sexual pain for 95% of the population doesn't have to exist. There are those few people for whom their bodies are an exception, and this is something that they learn to cope with, but it's not the norm. If you're having sexual pain, it's not anything that you need to live with.
Yeah, and that sexuality is not, I think many messages that women get, whether they're Mormon or not, is that sexuality is to be endured.
Right.
Or something that, you just do for the sake of the marriage, instead of something that really you own and expect to be pleasurable. And even this kind of mythology around the first time being very painful, I think that that's not necessarily true.
Right.
Obviously, anytime you're trying something new or opening up, a muscle cavity that hasn't been opened before, there might be some discomfort or some newness around that, but it doesn't necessarily have to be painful, especially if the partner is communicative and foreplay has been, introduced. If there's lubrication, if you go from kissing over the altar to all of a sudden you're naked and expecting to have, really great sex within 5 minutes, you may not be lubricated enough, and a first time encounter might be painful. And so I think lubrication even plays a big role in first time sex.
Absolutely. And if I may put a plug in for not having that type of sex, going from making out at the altar to just sex in the next few hours, can I just put a plug in to not do that?
Yes,
Because you'll
I totally agree. I think that I would say if you're the type of couple that barely made it to the temple,
right,
we know what that means,
right,
then you might have really great honeymoon sex, right? Because you've been
right.
building up this foreplay
Yes,
for months.
yes, yes.
But if you're the type that has been very careful and been, wanting to be very careful about your physical relationship and
Mm.
have really had very limited sexuality prior to marriage, then you may want to take, the first 2 or 3 weeks of your marriage to do that natural build up and not
Absolutely.
necessarily feel like, if you don't have sex that first night, that somehow you're a failure as a couple or something. Just take time and have fun with each other, kind of doing what you maybe would have done when you were dating, but
Yes,
chose not
yes.
to.
Yeah, I think we because many of us wait until we're married to have sex, we kind of skip over some really important developmental steps in the development of our physical relationship. And because if you were not waiting, then most couples will, like you said, just kind of build up and build up and build up until they have sex. There's a lot of foreplay, there's a lot of anticipation, and there's already been some time spent getting to know each other's bodies and touch and feeling comfortable with this situation. And all of that is going to play into whether or not your first sexual experience is better and not painful and one you can build on. But I will say, if your first sexual experience or your second or third are not great, that's okay. You're still not failures. Just like nobody got on and rode their bike the first time perfectly or does anything perfectly. It's going to take lots of laughter and communication and time and education and practice, and you'll get it just fine.
Yeah, I love that. I to really see your sexuality as a journey that you get to embark on together versus we're going to have this all figured out right away.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
think there's a lot of messages given, just even in our overall culture, that somehow, your worth or value is in being a good lover and
Mm-hmm.
knowing how to do what and knowing how to turn your partner on. And somehow that's really readily displayed in the media, especially that just happens naturally with very little communication.
Right,
That somehow
right.
you just have ESP powers that
Uh-huh,
just you naturally know,
uh-huh.
and that's so unrealistic and sets people, I think, up for some expectations that are false as far as how to move forward. And while we're on premarital or not premarital, but honeymoon sex, I
Uh-huh.
think it's important to just lay out these expectations about sexuality having an aspect to it that is not necessarily what you've been taught about, right? So that there's a lot of bodily fluid. I mean, that's what we're talking about on this
Mm-hmm.
podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have talked about sex in ways where it's really been framed in this, it's beautiful, it's sacred, it's special.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes those words don't completely prepare you for it's also primal and animalistic and
Totally.
raw, and there's
Mm-hmm.
bodies and there's odors and there's fluid
And
and
sounds.
sounds, and you may be completely unprepared to know how to merge those two concepts together.
Yes, I think that's so important to bring up. And that because we do use so much heavy verbiage around it is sacred and bonding, and we never use the word fun. Like, this is gonna also really, really fun. And you can be jokey about it and silly, and you can laugh with each other. And I think that's an important, when you're trying to learn something, it's really important to not take yourselves too seriously and kind of let your egos get out of the way and just be like, whoa, that was weird. Or what, that was interesting. Let's do more of this, but let's change it up a little bit, or how was that for you? And just really exploring and becoming curious and playing with your sexuality, like anything else, like a new thing to learn will take some of the heaviness off. It doesn't always have to be sacred and bonding. That's a definite beautiful part and a wonderful part, but if that's the only focus, it's going to make it really heavy and really difficult to talk about.
Yeah, I agree. Great. All right, so let's move on to types of
Okay.
lube, and what's out there. What types are there? What products do you recommend? Are there different types for different situations, et cetera, et cetera?
Yes, yes, and yes, all of that. So, gosh, you go online or you go to any store, there's so much lube out there that it can be quite overwhelming. But most people will just go to the grocery store and grab their little tube of KY because it's convenient and it's cheap. Um, and so I'm going to kind of talk about why that's not a good idea and why it's important to spend a little bit more money on some good quality stuff. So, first of all, what people need to know is, and people haven't, is that the FDA does not regulate lubrication. And they don't regulate lubrication because there isn't like a category for it. So the only way that it can get through the FDA is if it's approved as a medical device. And it costs hundreds of thousands of dollars to get anything through the FDA. And having it go through as a medical device is still not really describing what lube is. And so lubrication, anybody can make lubrication and say it's natural, it's organic, it'll do this for your body and do that. They can put anything they want on these labels, and you really don't know what you're getting. So I need to give a shout out, kudos to Sarah Mueller, and she's at the Smitten Kitten in Minnesota or Minneapolis, and she has taken upon herself to do an amazing amount of research on lubrication because she realized that there was no research out there, and that she was working with some of her clients trying to figure out why they were having continued sexual pain. And as she started looking into the components of the various lubrications and the ingredients, she realized, oh my gosh, this is why people are having pain, because she would talk to various chemists and say, what's this ingredient? What does it do? And what does this do? And for example, one of the main ingredients in KY, and I don't want to just put down KY, but I kind of do. One of the ingredients in KY, not to get too technical, but what it essentially does is it will go into the cells of your vaginal lining, and it will push out the water that's inside the cells. So what it does is then it dehydrates the cells of your vaginal wall. And when something is dehydrated and is getting rubbed up against, that hurts. That causes, basically it's causing the outer layer of your vagina to slough off. So if it sloughs off, you're a little bit more raw. And then what people do is they think, oh, I'm kind of raw, I'm kind of burning, I need to use more lube. And so then they'll use more lube, and the same thing happens. And then it gets worse, and it gets worse, and it gets worse. And what her research found is that nobody thinks to blame their lube for pain. Everyone thinks that there's something going on with them, or something, that maybe their muscles are tight, and which can all be true, but nobody thinks to go, I wonder if what I'm putting on my skin is actually burning me. And that's a huge kind of eye opener, because people will just, like I said, continue to use the same type of lube over and over. So my sex educator friends and I have all decided that we no longer, you just don't let friends use KY. Friends don't let friends use KY. So another type of thing, another thing you want to look out for is you do not want any lubrication that has glycerin or honey. And you would be amazed at how many lubes have glycerin and honey. And obviously honey, that's sugar. And you might think, well, sugar's natural, and glycerin is also a form of sugar. Sugar and the vagina do not go together. Sugar will lead to one yeast infection after another. So people will go to parties, especially when they're going to get married, before they get married, and they'll get all these fun flavored lubes like cherry lube and coconut lube and all these things. And all you're doing is introducing all sorts of sugar into your vagina and asking for trouble. So those flavored lubes can be fun, but not for women. They can be, or at least not for the vagina. Use the flavored lube on breasts or on the inside of the elbow or wherever else you want to lick, but not.
And what about vulva or like the labial areas of, is that not safe for that as well? Like if you want to do oral sex and have some type of flavoring, that's probably not a good idea.
No flavored lube. You can add just, some people might think about adding essential oils a little bit if it's conducive to, you have to find out if that is an okay thing to put on skin. You've got to do some checking, but at least there's no sugar or glycerin in an essential oil. But think of the vulva, the vagina, as like the skin on the rest of your body. And if you would not put cheap eye cream around your eye, why are you going to put something cheap on your vulva? You know, it's YES and then an exclamation point. They have wonderful ingredients. They can only be purchased online because they're out of Europe. But they don't do any animal testing, which is why they haven't tried to go get any sort of approval here in the United States. It's just against their ethics. And I would say if you are a person who is experiencing pain or has used these other types of lubes, that just as you would, if you have chapped lips, you would apply chapstick not just when you're going to kiss somebody, but you would be applying it all the time to help heal that skin. So you can use the Yes Lube, you can use Coco New, which is it's local to Utah. You can use your own saliva, but I would suggest if you're trying to heal some skin to get the good quality lube and put it on a little bit every day. Just like I said, if you were trying to heal chapped lips. Because if you're only putting it on when you're going to have sex, you could still have some skin in there that's raw, that's trying to heal, and that needs a little bit extra attention. And clients of mine who have kind of done that protocol of applying just a little bit, and lubrication, if you've ever tried lubrication, a little bit goes a long, long way. So you don't need to take the tube and just do a big squeeze in your hand because you will get so much. And that's why it can be really worth it, because if you pay $20 for a tube of lube, it's going to last you a long time, because all you really need to use is about the size of, most people find that all you need is about the size of a nickel, about that much, and sometimes a little bit more, but usually that's about it. And if you just use that every day as you're trying to heal some skin, it will help with reducing whatever pain you might be experiencing. Another one to watch out for is Astroglide, which is also found in grocery stores. It won't cause the same sloughing off. It won't cause the burning. Astroglide is different in that it hydrates the cells to the point that they explode. And that doesn't really have any negative indications for women. It has negative indications for people who may be trying to get pregnant, because the Astroglide can go through the cell walls of the semen and cause the sperm to explode. So that
doesn't sound pleasant either.
No, it doesn't. I never knew, when I went to my training on lubrication, one, I didn't know that there could be an entire training on lubrication. And two, we just all sat there with our jaws open, just going, oh my gosh, we have got to tell the world. People cannot be using these things. So I'm really, really glad that we're talking about it, because I feel like, because there hasn't been this research out there, that people may be experiencing unnecessary pain or unnecessary frustration just because they're, and not thinking that their lube could be causing this, because we kind of are a trusting people. I think culturally overall, we generally trust labels and we trust boxes and we trust things that maybe we don't know enough about ourselves or don't know how to go about learning. And so we trust that when it says organic or good for you, or we see the couple on TV who's using the KY and they have this great sexual experience, we trust that that's going to happen for us too. And when it doesn't, again, we kind of tend to blame ourselves as opposed to looking at what could maybe be causing it.
Yeah, some relationship with authority there, as far as giving our authority away to other people instead of maybe taking more personal authority.
Yeah.
Okay. Absolutely. So some questions that all of this information brought up. What I was expecting you to talk about was water-based versus oil-based versus silicone-based. So when you're talking about, because even my understanding, if you're using a water-based lubricant, you might use a lot more just because it absorbs more quickly into your body than if you use an oil-based lubricant. And maybe you're saying that there's only certain types of products that really are helpful and that therefore would last longer. So can you go into maybe a little bit of, water, silicone, oil, and if some of those should just be put aside as well altogether? I'm scared now.
Yeah. No, don't be scared.
Okay.
There are good products out there.
I'm throwing everything away. No.
A lot of people will sometimes just use olive oil too, or coconut oil. And one thing that you can do, and this is nice because some people will say, well, but this one lube I use, it's cooling and that feels so good. And you can make your own lube cubes. Just take an ice cube tray, pour some just a tiny bit, you don't need very much, of coconut oil in each of the little cubes. They'll freeze up, and when you're ready to go, pop one of those things out, and it's nice and cool, and it'll melt down in your hands, and it feels really good. So you can use coconut oil, but it won't. And so now we'll get into the difference in water-based, silicone, and oil-based, because this is so overwhelming for people. It was overwhelming for me at first too, where I was like, what? There's water-based and silicone and oil, and can't I just buy lube?
Right.
The water-based lube is by far the cheapest. But this is interesting. People will think, well, yeah, let's get water-based because that'll be more natural. That'll be more like my body. Well, water gets, if it's just sitting in a container, it gets old and stale and moldy and bleh after a while. Water doesn't last. And so in order for water-based lube to last, they have to add a lot of preservatives to it and a lot of things to it. So actually a lot of the water-based lubes have more of the ingredients that you don't want. So again, cheaper is not better. But water-based lube, what it will do is it will absorb into your body, it will evaporate, and so if you're feeling like, we don't need this for very long, or I just kind of need this to get me started, water-based lube is great. And it will also not damage your sheets or not damage your clothing, things like that. Also, and this is really important, if you have any sort of sex toy or vibrator, you've got to use the water-based lube on it. And I'll tell everybody why when I get to silicone lube. But it's crucial that you use water-based lube with your toy. So that would be another reason to have water-based lube.
And you can find then water-based lube that does not include some of these sugar ingredients
Yes.
that you were talking about earlier.
Uh-huh. Yep. The Yes Lube, the Coconut, they both have water-based and silicone-based lubes. There's Sliquid. There's Good Clean Love. There are some other good. There are just a few good lube brands out there. But yes, they all make these two different kinds of lubes. So silicone-based is 100% synthetic, meaning it's created in a lab, but it is hypoallergenic. So if you're a person who is allergic to a lot of ingredients, silicone could be a really good thing for you. And it cannot soak into the skin. So what's nice is if you experiencing dryness, or if you're going to have a longer session or something's happening, the silicone-based lube will last longer. It will keep things moving. It's really nice. That said, sometimes people will complain that it makes things too slippery, and they don't. After a while, it's too slick and it's too. So you would want to play around with how much you use. Again, if you find that a nickel size is too much, go down to just like the tip of your pinky and kind of play around with that. A lot of people will like to use both water-based and silicone-based together because the water feels nice, it kind of gets things moving, and then once that evaporates in or is soaked into the skin, you still have the silicone on board to keep. So you can also play around with kind of a combination of the two. However, that said, if you are using a toy, do not use silicone lube because it will break down your toy. As well as, just that. It will break down your toy. If you're going to use condoms, if you're using condoms, lubrication really helps. And just a little bit of lube on the tip of the condom because condoms also can be raw. They're not very lubricated. And so I would highly suggest some sort of lubrication.
So a natural question that would arise, I think, for some is if silicone-based lubrication is powerful enough to break down my toy, why would it not harm my body?
I know. Well, because your toy is also made from silicone, and silicone on silicone, that's where the combination isn't good. And your body's not made of silicone. And so that's why it's not going to harm your body.
Okay, good.
That's
Just
a great
wanted
question.
to clarify that because I think a lot of this is, what's safe for me or what isn't safe.
Yeah. So there are some lubes that are hybrids that have the water and the silicone already in them, sort of like your shampoo and conditioner, the combo you can buy at the store. And so you can get one of those. The other type of lube is oil-based. And you need to be careful because you do not want petroleum-based lube. That's not going to be good for your body. But so your oil-based lube should all be plant-based. Coconut oil, olive oil, whatever, it should be the main ingredient. Shea butter. But here's what you need to know about oil. One, oil-based is very good for postmenopause. It's very helpful. It doesn't have any sort of estrogens in it, things like that. And so if anyone is listening thinking postmenopause, oil-based lube is really does a good job. That the thing that people should remember is that an oil-based lube is not compatible with latex, and most condoms are made from latex. So if you are, it will break down the condoms. So if you are using condoms regularly and you are going to use lubrication and for some reason you've decided on an oil-based, don't do it. No oil-based lubes for that. And is it okay if we just quickly mention a little bit about anal sex? I know that this is a tough topic, but some people want to know about this and are curious about it. And
yeah, absolutely. No, I think that it's really important for us on this show to normalize sexual behaviors. And I think a really important thing to remember is that just because something doesn't fall in your sexual template or sexual arousal does not mean it doesn't for others. And I know that I've talked to many Mormon women in particular that feel so much shame around enjoying anal play just because they feel like it's unnatural or unholy. And I think that's a lot of the work we need to do within Mormon sexuality is kind of break down some of those mythological barriers that, versus is this particular behavior bad? It's more about, does it edify my relationship with my spouse? Does it edify my relationship with my own sexual self?
yes,
Is this a pleasurable thing, non-pleasurable? I mean, because even things like that would be considered more vanilla can actually be very harmful for certain people, depending on how it's done and the attitudes and expectations around that, right? So you can have a couple that is just having missionary position sex in very unhealthy ways towards their relationship. So yes, please.
Okay, so the only thing I would say is if you are going to engage in any sort of anal play where there's going to be insertion in the anus, you have to you have to, and I cannot emphasize that enough, not only lubrication, but lubrication that's almost specifically formulated for anal play because it is thicker than lube that you would buy in the store, and the anus is so sensitive and the skin is so sensitive and little tears and fissures can occur so easily that unless you have a good thick lubricant that is going to stay in place, you can cause some real damage. So just make sure that, and then again, if a condom is going to be used, make sure that you are not using any sort of oil-based lube and in your anal area as well. So,
and this, you would mean this for any type of penetration, whether it's penis, finger, toy, anal plug, anything along those lines should come with lubrication. And do you have certain products that you would call out to that as far as like these thicker types that you're talking about?
Also, the brands I've mentioned also have thicker types, but it's not, even though the skin of the anus is quite sensitive, you don't have the mucous membranes like you do in the vaginal wall area, and so you're not as limited as far as the other types of lubes. And so there's a little bit more variety. Just make sure it's thick, is what I would say. So you can go in. There are a lot of sex shops around that are willing to, they have just a wall of lubes and testers, and you can go in and put a little bit on your hand and see what it feels like and see if you like it. And I would just say, like you go test out perfume, go test out lubes at your local sex store. Generally speaking, they're not in the back room, and some people are quite uncomfortable going in the back room, and they usually have their lubes out more in the general area, so you don't have to go into the back room. I'll also say that you're welcome to go to my website, which is sexyissafe.com, and there my sister, who is also an ASECT certified sex therapist, she and I have curated some products. Basically, we've gone into the back room for you, and we have some products on that site, and we have specifically designed the site so that people will feel comfortable going to it. There aren't any pictures that I don't know that people don't want to see necessarily. It's just a site where you can get information on a few toys and tools and lubricants and buy a few. So there you go.
And I will make sure to link to all of these different things that you're mentioning on the podcast as well.
Okay.
And so just to revisit that, it's not necessarily that lubrications are going to be marketed towards anal sex. It's more about feeling the texture and making sure you're choosing one that feels more substantial than others.
Yeah, and there are some that will say right on them, this is for anal sex or anal play or whatever, and you can see those. But typically in any of your sex shops, you'll be able to say, this is the type of lube I'm looking for, and they'll point you to several kinds that you can then test out and see if you like how it feels.
Okay, great. Just how to, when you talk about applying lubrication, and you did a good job of mentioning kind of the amounts, what about the specifics about where exactly to apply? Are we talking about on the labia? Are we talking about inserting into actually the vaginal cavity like you would, a tampon? Do you apply it to the male as well? So can you give us some specifics about that?
Sure. And this is where, before I give you specifics, I would say this is where you kind of get to play and have fun too, because it can be fun to test out, how does lube feel on my labia? Ooh, that feels nice, or I'm not sure. How does it feel on the inner, like on the inside of the lips of the labia? How does it feel if it's on a finger and it goes inside the vagina? Do I like it like that? Do we like it like that? How does it feel if we put it on the penis instead of on the vagina? And this is where couples need to, again, communicate and test some things out. What works for us? What works for the types of positions that we're going to be using? And if we try a different position, do we need to put it somewhere else? And so that said, of course, there are some standard, if a condom is going to be used, put some on the tip of the condom. If there is pain involved, use more. If you're trying to recover from some pain, or if it's the first time you're going to have sex after a baby, which is always very scary for women if they've had a vaginal birth, use more, use plenty, and go slowly. You can add more if you need more, but the key would be to go slowly and kind of see, is this enough? Have we used enough? Do we need to add more? Is it too much? But like I said, don't squeeze. You don't need to squeeze a whole ton out of your tube, and especially if you're going to do anal play, it needs to go right around the actual anus, and make sure there's quite a bit, as well as on the penis or any other penetrative. If you're using a toy or a finger, make sure there's a lot. And I would actually add, if you are going to do any sort of anal play with a finger, A, make sure your fingers are clean, and B, you may want to use some sort of protective barrier on a finger just to help protect the skin of the anus. But as far as anywhere else, put it where you'd like and try it out.
And as far as afterwards, do most people feel like there's residue, or they need to wash it off? Like, as far as what's left over, what are some of the I mean, this is probably why some people prefer water-based, right? It's because it becomes more absorbed, versus now you're left with a lot of oily residue or things like that. So any tips on after sexuality?
Yeah. So water-based is just going to absorb, go away. But the silicone, oil-based, you're definitely going to want to wipe off. A lot of people will keep just cleaning wipes right by their bed, or wherever they're engaging in sex. And that's kind of a nice way to go ahead and get extra lubrication wiped off. Again, if you're a woman and you have ever, or a man, if you've ever gone to the doctor and had a proctology visit, or you've gone to the gynecologist and had an exam, a pelvic exam, they use this lubrication, and generally they hand you some sort of wipe to clean off. It's kind of the same thing. So it's not that you're sending a message that somebody's dirty, or that this was unclean, or that you didn't like what they did, because sometimes people can feel like, oh, you're wiping me off, or you're wiping off our experience. No, you're just getting cleaned off. So that, again, because if you don't, like I said, it can kind of ruin sheets, or it can ruin clothing, because it is that oil-based, and so it'll just kind of stay around.
Yeah, great. Again, the importance of the messaging, right? Like what we assume or don't assume if we're not talking.
Yeah.
And then just some really just details on a few things you said. You talked about with anal play having a barrier. Are you meaning like a latex glove or a condom or something like that, even if you're using a finger? Is that what you meant by that?
Yeah, because just watch your fingernails, because if your fingernails are sharp in any way, you can cause, and you don't have enough lube, you can cause some minor tearing and things like that. So some people will just even use plastic wrap, because it's a way to cover up and make sure that fingernail isn't going to cause any issue. And that's the same thing can be done if you're going for the first time to insert a finger into the vagina, or you're welcome to also put some plastic wrap over your finger, or something small like a glove, just to help slide it in a little bit if you're concerned about pain or how this is going to feel like. Anything that's going to help reduce friction can then lead to a reduction of anxiety, which can then lead the next time to going, oh, I'm okay. Let's try it without that now, because I think I'm okay. Because it can be really scary the first time you have something put into your body and you're not sure how it's going to feel. And anything that can be done to reduce anxiety is not only going to help you, the receiver, but it's also going to help your partner, because they're the last thing they want to do is cause you pain. Um, and then that will just only help your future sex life as um, as you're continuing to reduce anxiety. Then that opens you up to, I like this. Let's do more of this, or now let's try this, and it kind of allows your curiosity and playfulness to keep moving forward instead of all of a sudden coming to a halt.
Yeah, and then one last detail that I would just say, since you mentioned after having a child, you know, kind of some of the anxiety around sexual intercourse after that, I know that I've talked to a lot of women that were shocked that after a C-section there was vaginal discomfort. In fact, they were expecting, because there was a C-section and I didn't have, you know, this vaginal birth, that somehow, and so just to be prepared too, that just because whether you've had a vaginal birth or a C-section birth, there can still be vaginal dryness as you prepare to have sex again, because again of some of the hormone issues that you talked about, and whether or not the baby has gone through the birth canal. So
Right, and stress and sleep deprivation and all of that can cause a lot of anxiety around the first time you have sex again, which then can lead to pain. So, yep, I'm glad you mentioned that.
And so it sounds, I mean, this is kind of stating the obvious from what you've said, but you obviously do not have to have a diagnosable condition to benefit from lube use, right? This seems like very much something that is just part of kind of our hygienic care, and being able to use this is, again, it's not a crutch or a weakness. This is really just part of taking care of a part of our body, just like we would put on body lotion or facial cream or whatever it is that we do for other parts of our bodies.
Absolutely. Yeah. This is using your blow dryer to do your hair, you know, instead of just going, well, it's just natural. I just have to let it dry however it's going to dry. You know, we do lots of things to make things better for our bodies, to make things more pleasurable. And there's no reason we can't use lubrication in the same way. All it is you're just enhancing what your body is already doing. You're just enhancing it or aiding it or whatever you need to do, but it's all about what works for you, what works for your sexuality, what works within your relationship. And if it works for you, then use it by all means, because it can just make things feel that much better and be that much more pleasurable and fun, which is only going to increase your intimacy and enhance your overall relationship.
Yeah, and I've heard of benefits even such as reduced bladder infections and urinary tract infections, just because you don't have as some of the implications that vaginal dryness would cause. So the more moisture there is there, the less some of those issues can occur.
Yeah, and with the amount of medicines that a lot of us are taking for whatever reason, it's just going to be, lube is just going to be a part of your regimen, like you said, kind of like your hygienic regimen. And you can be a totally crunchy, medicine-free, home birthing woman and still use lube. You know, it's nobody's business. Like you said, it's not a weakness, it's not a crutch, it's not anything like that. It's just like your toothpaste or like your facial cream, like you said. It just is something else to use for your body.
Well, great. I think this has been extremely informative and useful, and I think it's just so, part of what is so useful about it is just reframing expectations and just having that education and knowing, hey, I'm not abnormal if this is an issue that I've run across, or you know, I just think so many things that we've talked about today can be very useful in reframing and having healthier expectations for our sex lives. Absolutely.
Yep.
Well, great. I've come kind of to the end of my questions. Is there anything in particular that you'd like to close us off with, or anything I haven't asked you about that you'd want to make sure you cover?
I think we've covered a lot about lube. Just my biggest plug is no question is a bad question, and whatever question you have about your sexuality or that of your partners or your bodies, or seek education and find the answers you're looking for, because they're out there, and it will just help you have a healthier, happier life. I guess that's all I would end with.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Alisha, for coming on. This was very useful, and I look forward to hopefully having you back on to have a more intensive discussion about sex toys.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks so much for everything you're doing. And I'm a fan. We just all love you. So keep doing it.
Oh, thanks so much. Have a good afternoon.
Okay, you too.
We took the long road home, turned minutes into miles, and as the evening traveled on, the sunset bathed your smile. We stopped beneath the desert stars, wrapped in each other's arms. Was as simple as I love you, an ordinary, extraordinary truth.
It's been a long road here, a trail with tears, pain and sorrow too.
But through every storm we traveled on, like lovers do. And if sometimes we fell apart, we always came back home. Was as simple as I love you, an ordinary, extraordinary truth. Some people say love is blind and forever is too long. But I see your eyes in every sunrise. Can't imagine life alone. Let's take the long road on together until we're gone. Want you by my side till the day I die and into the beyond. It's as simple as our love is. That's how I wanna go, all wrapped up in the arms of our extraordinary, it's nothing ordinary love. Ordinary,
Ordinary.
no, it's extraordinary.